Okay, who's the pony?
Firefly.
Firefly.
But it's not the original one. It's the Italian one.
It's Italian. How did you tell? Is it the green eyes she said?
I don't.
I think she said about the eyes. I think she looks Italian.
She looks Italian.
Yeah, the face.
Hola. Buongiorno.
See.
My name is Gemma Vinegates, Gem for short. I was born in the 80s. I represent that demographic of the Oldies, G1 collector. Although I had the toys as a child, when I got to, I don't know, about 9-10 years old, I sort of grown out of them somewhat. So I've only called myself as being an official collector since 2002. And as of about now, I have around about 1,500 plus items in my pony collection, covering G1, the original ponies, G3, 3.5 and 4. Although I do have a little bit soft spot for G2 merchandise. So that's me. So in the beginning, there was the 80s. Hands up if you was born in the 80s or earlier than the 80s. Oh, more than I thought. Hands up if you were born since the 80s. Okay, probably about just as many again, and maybe a few in there that don't really want to admit it. The 80s was both a fantastic and terrible decade.
Yes.
Hat shop.
The best and the worst of everything. It had some of the worst haircuts, some of the most annoying toys, some of the most annoying people, but on the other side, just to balance out all of the irritating aspects of the 80s, there were, of course, all of the best things. The best music, pop music perhaps, some might argue rock music as well, the best cartoons.
Yes.
Gemma Bears, with my namesake, and of course, all of the best toys. So here is where it all starts. And it all starts with a lady called Brony Shoutouts. She is the creator of the concept of My Little Pony. That's a picture of her taken a couple of years ago. And she was working as a product development, part of the product development team for Hasbro back in the 1980s. And her job was to come up with new concepts for toys. And so she came up with the concept of a pony that you can brush and stroke and kind of take care of. And this was because when she was growing up, she grew up around horses, and she just loved horses. And so she took that love and that passion for horses into her ideas for the toys. And so she came up with the concept of what she calls a pony. And this is documented in this book, My Little Pony Tale, which is a picture storybook that she's recently released, which describes in sort of children's storybook style how she came up with the concept of My Little Pony. And the ponies that she originally drew looked absolutely nothing like the original G1 toys. They were much, much more horse-like. They had bigger kind of rounded noses. Anybody who's familiar with the Cabbage Patch ponies, they kind of looked a little bit more like those. This is Bonnie on her little pony. So she pitched the concept of pony to Hasbro, and they were kind of on board with the idea. And what she pitched as pony was eventually developed into this, which is My Pretty Pony, arguably the first My Little Pony toy. Bonnie has confessed herself that she does not like this thing, and it does not represent exactly what her conceptual idea was. This actual pony was designed by a sculptor who was working for Hasbro at the time, who actually took Bonnie's concept and developed it into this, which forms the basis of Hasbro's patent, the My Little Pony, which you can see on the right hand side there. So this humble plastic toy, unfortunately mine doesn't work, but this humble plastic toy formed the basis of the entire 30 years plus of My Little Pony that we know today. So when Bonnie was pitching the idea of My Little Pony, she she was very much thinking that they would be more naturalistic horses. She was drawing them in the typical horsey colours, like brown, black, bay, pinto, that kind of thing. And the Hasbro executives were not kind of sold on this idea, and she spoke to her colleagues and shared her ideas, and they're like, but girls like pink and purple, they don't like brown and black and this sort of thing. And so this is how Pony ended up evolving into pink and purple. On the left hand side there are actually Bonnie's drawings, so you can see that's a little more what she imagined that the ponies would look like. And then on the right hand side obviously is what the original set of plastic ponies that followed this looked like. So of course once My Little Pony was established, Hasbro needed a way in order to be able to sell lots of toys. And the 80s, the way that sold
Who's a silly pony?
fantastic cartoons, and that concept never really died. And they're still doing that today. And it was through those My Little Pony cartoons not only that they sold the toys, but they established some of the most iconic characters in My Little Pony that formed the inspiration for Friendship is Magic. So I just want to pick on a few.
Yeah.
The ones that started.
Firefly, which would eventually evolve into Rainbow Dash. Applejack, of course, we know. Twilight, which would kind of evolve into Twilight Sparkle, sorry. Sparkler, evolving into Rarity. Surprise, which ended up as Pinkie Pie. Posy, of course, which evolves into Fluttershy. And Spike, who never really changed. And the world was never the same again. So, through the years, showing the cartoons, it all started with Rescue at Midnight Castle in 1984, which was a long feature-length special featuring Firefly as kind of the key heroic character, very much embodying the spirit of Rainbow Dash today, you know, heroic, feisty, getting in there, you know, very much in there, if you like, putting themselves forward. And that was followed by Escape from Katrina. These are great stories, you know, they've got bad guys, and there's lots of kind of fairy tale elements and fun and journeys and peril and all this kind of stuff. My Little Pony the movie came out in cinemas in 1986. This was when, you know, the My Little Pony cartoon was kind of at its height and reaching the biggest audience, and was then followed by, of course, the TV series in the late 80s. In the early 90s, they launched My Little Pony Tales. Has anybody here watched any My Little Pony Tales? Not very many people. This was a significant departure from the My Little Pony cartoons that existed. The cartoons before were a lot about fantasy and bad guys and fairy tales and adventure, whereas My Little Pony Tales was set in a small town. The ponies were all more a teenage kind of age, and they went to school and they worried about boyfriends and who likes who, and, you know, going to rock concerts and babysitting their kids, and it was much more
Riding around on little mopeds.
Relationships, yeah.
Ship.
But it set down the concept of the core cast of characters. My Little Pony Tales, there were 7 characters: Starlight, Sweetheart, Melody, Bright as Patch, Clover, and Bonbon, and they were all friends. And that concept has been carried through into later generations. It was refined in G3, with the core 7 characters, and of course we have the main 6 characters today in Friendship and Magic, which form the core cast, and then everything sits around that. So of course, once you have cartoons, you have excitement, and of course it's all about selling the toys. And over the years, Hasbro R&D people had to come up with ever more creative gimmicks and ideas, because essentially My Little Pony is a very simple toy. It's a plastic horse with brushable hair. You know, how much can you actually do with it? And so I think it's quite remarkable that the toy has survived this long, simply because, you know, it's such a simple concept. So over the years, they came up with a lot of different ideas. On the top left there, you can see the Dance and Prance ponies, where wound up a button in their chests, and then when you let them go, they kind of jig about in a crazy manner, which is supposed to represent some form of disco dancing. And they come with all of these fancy disco type accessories. On the right hand side there, you can see a number of different concepts: Twice as Fancy ponies with the symbols all over their bodies, happy tails, which when you squeeze their tummies, they wag their tails and like they're happy to see you. Magic ponies, where their symbols are activated by heat, so they show a secret image underneath. And the Sunday best ponies, which supposedly smell like sweet-scented ice cream. But also, not only do you get the legitimate toys out there, you of course get the bootlegging. And these are a couple of examples of what we collectors affectionately term fakies, which are effectively the copies, the knockoffs, if you like. Part of the reasons why this exists is because in China, where most of the ponies are manufactured, actual copyright and intellectual property law is actually quite weak, and therefore the idea that you safeguard your intellectual property and you don't copy things that don't belong to you is not a very strong concept out there. So a lot of the fake toys are emerging out there, people trying to cash in on the My Little Pony concept. But on the bottom right-hand side here, you also see what we G1 collectors term Nirvana ponies, and I'll explain what Nirvana means in a moment. Now, these are not fakies. When Hasbro wanted to sell its toys around the world, one of the things that they would do is they would recognise the fact that the toys that were mainly being manufactured for the Western markets were actually quite expensive when it came to sell in poorer countries like Mexico or places like that. And so they wanted to be able to sell their toys around the world to the widest audience possible. So what they would do is they would sell licenses to local toy factories and allow them to use the moulds, the concepts, the designs and the packaging in order to produce the ponies locally at a lower cost, which would be more affordable for the local population. But when these ponies got produced, sometimes they were significantly changed from what Western markets were, how they would have appeared in the shops. And now, today, these days, these foreign ponies are very, very collectible. I've got a couple of examples here. So this is the original G1 Masquerade Twinkle Eye pony that would have been available in stores all across the Western world. And this is Masquerade from Argentina. So you can see not only she got a different pose, she's got a different colour, she's got rainbow hair, they just, mess around with the concepts. But it's these changes and these differences that make them very attractive to collectors. And these ponies go for significantly higher values than their regular equivalents. But they are legitimate in the sense that they are licensed Hasbro toys, unlike these fakes. But all good things must come to an end. And getting into the early 90s, My Little Pony is kind of running out of steam. The young children that had the toys are starting to get that little bit older, they're starting to grow out of them now. And so in the 10th anniversary in 1992, Hasbro pumped out some of their most gimmicky ponies to date, kind of throwing it all out there for their 10th anniversary. And that in fact was the last year that My Little Pony was available in the USA, where it had all originally started. They hung on for 3 more years in Europe, and Pony was to officially die, if you like, in their G1 incarnation of all places in Holland. In 1995, on the top right hand, this set of ponies, we call them just the Dutch ponies or the Dutchies, were released, and none of them were original concepts. They were all copies and re-releases of previous ponies with different colours changed, and that would be where My Little Pony was to end. But there's a few other interesting things in those last 3 years in Europe, again trying to pump out those last few gimmicks to flog those few ponies. These 2 ponies in the middle here I've picked on because they were the last original moulds to be developed. So Hasbro developed moulds, poses for the ponies, and they quite often reused them throughout the years. But Baby Ruby at the top is part of the set, which also includes Baby Sapphire, whose copyright 1993, and that was the latest new baby pony mould produced. And at the bottom there is the Mummy Twins pony, copyright 1994, which is the last new My Little Pony mold design produced. Interesting thing about the Mummy Pony, underneath her belly she has this little hatch and a switch, and if you press the button in her chest, she unceremoniously gives birth. I'm sure the parents in the room will attest to the fact that childbirth is absolutely not at all. If only. Just to mention also in the 10th anniversary in the 90s, it was released the birthday pony to commemorate the occasion. So it's 1995 and My Little Pony G1 as we know it has come to an end. So where do we go from here? And on this chart I've attempted to document in extremely scientific fashion the evolution of My Little Pony's development over time. So its genesis is here in My Pretty Pony, this humble hard plastic toy that Bronies actually doesn't like very much. And this, of course, evolved into G1. The original toys merely looking like miniature versions, and then, of course, over time developing colours, poses, gimmicks, and all of the wonderful stuff that they developed. Then, over here, down the bottom, we kind of have G2. Generation 2, the second generation, started in around 1996, finished in the US around 1999, and ended in Europe about 2003. It's incredibly different to G1 and doesn't really bear much of a resemblance to any of the other generations. There is some argument, I would say, that it has an influence on G3, particularly in the play sets and some of the features and gimmicks that they brought in. Part of the reason why G2 is not well developed as a follow-on is because Hasbro gave it to Kenner Toys in order to develop the new toys. They bought out Kenner Toys during the 80s and they gave them the job of reviving My Little Pony. G1, I would say then, ultimately feeds into G3. When they released G3, starting in 2003, you can see from like the face shapes and designs of the ponies that they were very much trying to evoke, the original G1 ponies. They are, of course, different, but they're trying to bring back some of those kind of original design concepts so that they are more familiar. And then offshooting from G3, we of course have G3.5, and then ultimately an influences from G1 and G3 merge into G4. So I've already talked a bit about G2, so I won't spend too long on here. I call it the unloved generation because it is the least popular with collectors, it must be said. G2 ponies don't attract anything like the values of the other generations. And as I said before, in the late 90s, Hasbro wanted to attempt to revive My Little Pony. They considered it a key brand for theirs, and so they gave it to Kenner Toys to attempt to try and revive it. And so this is what they developed. Now, there's an argument to say they don't even look like ponies at all, but they're certainly incredibly different to what people are used to. But there was some good stuff in there. In G2 there were lots of interesting gimmicks and concepts, particularly for play sets. One of the concepts was about a magnet in the foot, activating features in the playset, an idea that was picked up and carried into G3, so much so that all the G3 ponies produced for the first few years of G3 all had the magnet in the foot, so they were all able to activate the features of the playsets. There were lots of babies. There were some cool playsets. There's one of my favourites is the yacht. The yacht that is sailed by two baby ponies, so I'm sure I'm not anywhere near old enough to be able to operate a yacht safely, but there you go. And it's great, it's a sailboat with a proper sail and everything, which I think is a great little idea. Also, some of the best stuff I think from G2 is some of the merchandise, which was everything from, Heinz spaghetti pony shapes, through to all sorts of different, body and bath products, and of course, duvet colours. So, although it's a bit of an unloved generation, it is not without its good points. So it is well worth it. Now, after after G2, of course, comes G3, and I call this getting it right because I have a slight little bit of a partiality to G3, because although they've fallen out of favour now, I still absolutely love G3, and I still think it's a great revival of the original ponies. Started in 2003, in fact in 2003 when some of the G3 ponies were coming out in Europe, G2s were still on the shelves, so there was a little bit of an overlap there. And it lasted all the way up till, 2008-9, when of course G3.5 came in for that very short period before Friendship is Magic came in 2010. And along the bottom there you can see some representations of different products in the range from G3, from the smallest, the Breezies. Yes, the Breezies is a G3 concept, which G4 has picked up. And I've got a handy little comparison here. Here is a G3 Breezy, here is a G4 Breezy, which is a little bit smaller, but you can see there are some similarities there. In G3 you have the Ponyville ponies, the small solid plastic ponies that made play sets. Arguably, the blind bags and the small vinyl figures from G4 are just simply picking up on this idea. You of course have the baby ponies and the adult ponies. Then you get into the styling size. They look the same size on that picture, but that pony is actually about more like 11 inches tall. And this of course evolves into the fashion style ponies and the styling size ponies in G4. And then right up at the top end, you've got the So Softs, which are the babies with the plastic heads and the squidgy bodies. Again, another concept that has been carried through into G4. So G3 needs a lot of credit for a lot of toy concepts and ideas that have been carried on into Friendship is Magic, and including some of the characters as well. On the top right there, you see Rarity in her original G3 incarnation, which looks very little, as of course, like the Rarity we're now familiar with in Friendship is Magic. I want to give a shout out to Minty, who of course reuses a G1 name, but became a bit of a G3 fan favourite. And I put Minty Christmas there because Minty ruined Christmas.
Yeah, Minty.
And then thought socks would be a suitable substitute for
No, it smells Christmas like a pair of socks.
for Christmas being wrecked.
Yeah.
But by this time, My Little Pony has become what Hasbro called one of their super brands. Don't underestimate the importance of My Little Pony to Hasbro as one of their core properties, and something which of course they attract huge amounts of value of, not just through the selling, but all the licensing deals that they do to sell the Pony themed products. But then after the success of G3, we have the little bit of a dark period in the development, which was of course G3.5. G3.5 is a little bit strange in the sense that Friendship is Magic had been in development since 2008, and of course these were released in the sort of 2008-9 time frame, and lasted for such a short time. So there's kind of an unanswered question there about why Hasbro would, when they were already starting to work on Friendship is Magic, would develop this toy line that had such a short lifespan. They really took the design to the extreme, the tiniest necks possible, with the biggest heads possible, with the skinniest thighs possible, with the biggest feet possible. It's like My Little Pony on drugs. I think what they were trying to do here is that they recognised that My Little Pony, as toys, generally appealed to younger children, and as time has gone on, it's younger and younger children that are actually playing with the plastic ponies. In the 80s they would play with them that little bit longer until they got that little bit older, but in the modern world I think they're playing with them at that much younger age, and so they tried to reflect that in making them that little bit more kind of chunky, kid-like, big eyes. I call them poor orphans because in G3, none of the baby ponies were at all related to any adult ponies. In G1, of course, we know that there were baby ponies, and more often than not, certainly in the early years, they had a mother, a grown-up, who was related to them in some way. And in G3, there just wasn't that. The baby ponies weren't related to anybody. And so in G3.5 they developed the concept of the mummy pony. So this is standard G3.5 Pinkie Pie. This is G3.5 Mama Pie. And this is G3.5 Baby Pie. And the reason why they developed these was all through their research with children. So one of the things that they do when they're developing toys is they bring in young children and they put them in a playroom and they give them the toys and they just let them play with them. And they observe how the kids actually play with the toys. And one of the Hasbro marketing people was telling me that one of the things that they observed when they were playing with the toys is they always paired up the babies with an adult pony to make little families. And so they asked the children about these and they said, so why do you do that? You know, they wanted to understand. They said, because the babies are orphans. You know, because they don't have a mummy. And so they developed this concept of the mummy pony in 3.5 so that they would have kind of like a ready-made family and a baby to care for, which I thought was really interesting. Has anybody seen the G3.5 cartoon, of which there was one? Is it awful?
No, it's not. It's quite good actually.
So yeah, the less said about that. Right, so then of course we perhaps start to get into slightly more familiar territory. Most of you will probably know that on the top left there, that is Laura and Faust. Faust, I may not be talking about that. Who was a fan of the original My Little Ponies and took some of those concepts and ideas and developed what we now know as, of course, as Friendship is Magic. And as I mentioned on the earlier slide with pictures of some of the G1 ponies, those fueled her ideas to further develop them into the Friendship is Magic characters. Now I suspect that Hasbro's marketing people probably had a degree of influence in development of the main 6 characters. They probably said things like, well, you've got to make sure there's a couple of unicorns in there, and there's a couple of earth ponies there, and there's a couple of winged ones in there to keep it balanced, and we're going to make sure that you don't go with all pink ones and then all of the same colour. And we really liked Rainbow Dash from G3, so we're going to get her in there somewhere, although, you know, we'll completely change her personality and everything. I would argue that perhaps G3 Rainbow Dash was, of course, the fashionista girl, and perhaps maybe a little bit of an influence over the character of Rarity. So there are some drawings there, which I believe would be done by Lauren, which were, you know, those original G1 pony influences. But of course, it's all about selling the toys. Cartoons are great, but they want to make sure that they get their money's worth out of the toys. So this slide here represents the plethora of G4 toys that are available. They of course are the brushable line, which come in the various different sizes, not too dissimilar to the range of toys that there were in G3, going from all the way down with the solid vinyl plastic figures like the Ponyville, all the way up to like the styling size, and the So Soft ponies. Then we've got My Little Pony Pop, which is a relatively recent offshoot of the My Little Pony line, with the buildable ponies that you can mash up together. Of course, they've just introduced most recently the Play School line, which are for the very, very youngest children. Of course, we have Equestria Girls. So I think Hasbro are trying to cover all bases here, you know, all age groups from, you know, sort of 1, 2, all the way up to, you know, as late as they possibly can, to make sure that they're maximising their revenues. And of course that stretches into adulthood now as well. It was at a convention in 2008 in Rhode Island where Hasbro were presented with saying that they recognise the adult collector market, which is something that they've not previously recognised before, and stated their intention that they were going to develop toys specifically targeted towards adults rather than children. And we start to see that in G3 with some of like the convention exclusives and things like that, and art ponies. But of course we see it much more strongly in G4. We've got all of the Funko range. We've got the new Guardians of Harmony, which have come out recently, and tons of adult-based merchandise. You know, we can use to messenger bags, to absolutely everything imaginable. And this is Hasbro absolutely recognising that adult-based market for their toys. It's not just all about children. So finally, this is some bonus material I've inserted for this version of the presentation. I attended the My Little Pony fair back in July this year, and at the fair there was this lady here on the top right-hand corner who was Ruth Bush, who worked as a Hasbro packaging designer and later research and development product developer for Hasbro during the 80s. And she told us about some products which she worked on or developed or pitched to Hasbro executives that never made it to the shops. So I'm going to tell you about a few of those today. Who has seen this picture? Who has seen this picture before? A couple of you. This one's been floating around on the forums for a while, and they were suspected to be a back card design of never before released G1 ponies. At the fair we actually learned all of the missing information. They were a set that was going to be released possibly 1991, 1992, and they reached a very advanced stage of product development. There were 4 ponies in the set. They were going to be called Fancy Swirl ponies, and at the con we got the full back card art which featured the name of the set. That even had the full back card story written on the back for all the ponies, and we even got their names as well. They were going to be called Swirled Out, Pearl Shine, Misty Glow and Star Swirl, which is a name Star Swirl. But for some reason they got pulled very late on in the development stages. A couple of other things that were developed in the middle there, you can see a picture of a prototype for a not manufactured playset called the Flutter Hideaway. There was going to be a small playset for the G1 Flutter ponies. I have here the sort of conceptual drawing done by of the Flutter Hideaway, and at the bottom right hand corner there you can't really see the detail on there. It's actually her technical drawings. So one of her jobs was actually to do the technical drawings, like the engineering drawings if you like, for all of the proper dimensions and things like that, so that the model shop could then take them and turn them into a manufactured product. Also, this playset was going to be reused as a not released Fairy Tales playset. It was going to be called the Fairy Tales Getting Fancy Salon or something like that, and it would have had different stickers and different accessories inside. But again, to save on cost, Hasbro would have reused molds and designs and concepts. Another thing which is not shown on the side here, any oldies recognise this pony? So this is Dabble. She was a mail order exclusive, which you could get by sending off some pony points and some money through their mail order program. But she was actually originally destined to be part of a set of 6 ponies along the same concept with the multicoloured hair. We don't actually have any names or anything, but we do have the artist's concept drawing, which would have formed the basis of the back card for the set of 6. But in the end, they cut the set of 6 to 2, and the 2 became mail orders as opposed to ponies that you could buy in the store. Why does this happen, you might ask? It's all about money. So Ruth told us that when she was presenting a lot of these concepts, they would get pulled by the executives simply because of the costs. If Hasbro's finances were down a little bit that year, pumping money into developing new molds, it costs a lot of money to develop a new product. They've got to pay all of those designers, they've got to develop all the sculpts and molds, they've got to do the test runs, they've got to do the safety testing. There's a lot of cost involved in developing a new product. And if Hasbro's finances weren't looking good that year, then they decided not to take forward some of the products. Also, some of the designs were simply more expensive to manufacture, in terms of material costs or labour, simply because of the labour in the design. So that's a little bit of an insight into some products that never made it to market. And that is the end of my presentation. I'm not. I saw Fantasia when I was very, very small a long time ago, and I think it was put on the television when I was very, very ill and off school. So I'm not sure I was entirely on par. But I will definitely go and do that. Oh, sorry. So I think someone here had their hand
Oh,
up.
no, don't.
It's a difficult question because it depends what hat I'm wearing. You know, if I'm wearing a Hasbro hat and I want to make as much money as possible, I'd flog G4 until I couldn't flog G4 anymore. But if I was me, I would probably go down the route of something like the Guardians of Harmony. Not so much the smaller figures, but like the big ones, like the Nightmare Moon and the Celestia. You know, something a bit more detailed, or something a bit more sophisticated, or something a bit more grown up, if you like. That would be me, but then I am a grown up. That's what appeals to me. That might not be what appeals to small children. But that would be how I'd like to see it. I hope they really do something more with like the big figures in the Guardians of Harmony set. I think that's the best one.
I remember you from a meeting in Hyde Park, July 2012,
Yes, I remember you.
and we played Pinch the Parcel,
Yep.
and I won a G3 pony, Round and Round, and that sparked my interest into the early generations of ponies. So I've got you to thank for that.
Oh, G3 as well, because I absolutely love G3. I think they did a great job reviving My Little Pony. I think when it comes to G2, I think that it was too early. It was too soon. G3 was the right time, I think, because those young collectors who'd had the toys as children in the 80s had got to that age now where they were thinking back about
I think it was
their
also
childhood.
because from the first generation to the third generation, the children that grew up with the original My Little Pony had now become mothers and having families of their own.
Yeah.
Absolutely, and that's why I think G3 was the right time, because they'd grown up, they were feeling nostalgic, they had children of their own, they wanted to share the toys that they loved with their children. So yeah, I think G2, they're great, they're sweet, and I'm sure those collectors who collect them love them, but I think they were kind of too soon to collect them.
And also G3 went back to the fantasy world again, which the original G1s started out in.
Okay, thank you. Question over here.
They recognised that there was an adult market in 2008. Is that right?
Yeah.
But these Guardians of Harmony and stuff have only been coming out in the last couple of years. Why do you think there was such a long gap between them recognising it and it being released? I know there is a cycle of...
Yeah, so in 2008 we were still 2 years away from the first Friendship is Magic toys coming out, and Hasbro confessed themselves that I don't think they had any expectations that Friendship is Magic was going to be quite the success that it was with the adult fans. I think when they originally developed it, they were still thinking about a cartoon for children to sell toys. I don't think they imagined, I think it kind of caught them by surprise. So in 2008 they were recognising the collectors, essentially the G1 collectors that had grown up and had got nostalgic thanks to G3, like we spoke about. And so they were starting to recognise that maybe there was a market there for selling ponies which were not, on the store shelves intended for children, but came in presentation boxes and came in slightly more adult-type designs. You have the art ponies coming up, like the G3, the black one with the swirling designs on it, and like the underwater designs, and then you have the Junko Mizuno Japanese designer pony with like the big funky plastic shoes and all that sort of thing. These they kept to the G3 pony mould, they didn't invent anything new in terms of the shape or anything like that, but in terms of the conceptual designs of the presentation, they were targeted much more toward grown-ups, but it was kind of a very small scale. And then when Friendship is Magic come out and it caught Hasbro by surprise, and there was suddenly lots of adult fan attention on it. I think think that's when it really launched. I think that's when it really launched it forward. So they were only recognising in 2008, it was kind of in its infancy then.
Thank you.
Okay.
I've got one of the ponies that's got like a little tattoo on it that you photograph and it lets you into the game.
Oh yeah. Zap codes thing.
Yeah, it's like a little shape and it's recognised and then she gets cake, which is great. But do you think they'll expand that to involve cheap electronics to make it?
It wouldn't surprise me. It wouldn't surprise me. So to come back to your question about where do you see My Little Pony going in the future, I definitely think that My Little Pony and probably toys, in fact, of the future will be a lot more interactive. You know, they'll interact with your phones, or you'll be able to plug them in the computer, and be able to download like upgrades for your toy and things like that. So you'll be, not only do you know, once you've bought the toy, you've bought the toy. But if you buy the toy and then you can add to the toy and enhance the toy, then that's more and more revenue. You know, thinking about it from I'm a toy company and I want to sell toys perspective. You know, once I've sold that toy, that's it. I don't get any more money out of it. But if I can get more and more revenue out of it by adding a way to grow, develop, change it through technology, then yeah, absolutely, I see that as the way it's going. Good question.
Something I think is quite interesting is like how much, like you said, it starts out with more natural and like real ponies, and then kind of as the generations have gone on, like through P2, P4, they've become sort of more exaggerated. You've got like more exaggerated ponies, dry, etc. And I was wondering your thoughts on like why that might be.
Easy to animate.
Yeah, I think that's a really astute observation, because it's the connection between the toy and the cartoon, and what kids watch is a cartoon representation that's exciting, and then the toy represents the kind of cartoon, what they like to see on the cartoon. And also, you know, young children, they like colours and things that can kind of big. I mean, traditional horse toys are still out there, but they're generally for a more mature kind of audience. I mean, you still get, you know, like the Breyers and things like that, and then you get all like the horses that come with the Barbies and things like that for the slightly older children. But, you know, the concept of the horse the pony not being realistic started like right there at the beginning, you know, with those Hasbro executives saying to Bonnie, you know, girls don't like brown and black, they like pink and purple, and it was set the tone for, you know, My Little Pony like for the next 30 years plus. But I think definitely it comes back to things like that childish feel.
Also, isn't it about horses' legs are very thin, so they can break quite easily?
Yes, there's also that. Yeah, there's also the production costs. You know, these kind of chubby, chunky plastic toys are extremely, you know, easy to mould, and they're very hard wearing. You know, I mean, I bought ponies on eBay and they've sent them to me in like 2 boxes lined with umpteen packing peanuts, and I think it's like, it's pretty robust, guys. You know, you just shove it in the bottom end, but I'm sure it will. So yeah, production costs could come into it as well. Hasbro, My Little Pony, in fact, I don't even know why it's not included on this presentation, but they did experiment with the grown-up horses. The Oldies are now the Dream Beauties. So Dream Beauties were a set of 18 My Little Ponies that were marketed as My Little Pony all grown up, and they were about this high, and they were plastic horses, you know, plastic moulded, proper horses. You know, they looked like proper horses. Quite why they didn't take off, not sure. Again, maybe they were trying to appeal to that slightly older market of kids, and it didn't really take off. And you know, the young kids were where it was at. I don't know. I'm not a parent, but I imagine that it's harder to say no to a screaming 3-year-old when they say I want a pony than you can reason with, you know, 9, 10-year-old perhaps when they're a bit older, but you can't reason with the little ones, let's say. Parents will contradict me there.
I was saying one thing that I don't really notice, but in the last 15 years or so, cartoons have changed. But in the 80s, you had really realistic stuff like E-Man. Then in the early 90s, you had like Looney Tunes, the new version. Then in the late 1990s, 2000s, on things like Destiny and Calvert, if you notice, it became less and less realistic and more like, I think the term is impressionist, but yeah, you're right.
Yeah, and that could potentially, I mean, I'm not an expert in cartoon development, this is more about the toys, it is about the cartoons, but I'm wondering whether it's a production thing, you know, whether they're, you know, easy to draw or easy to reproduce than the more detailed, you know, the more detailed, maybe it's about animation, because of course they've got to churn out these programs, you know, and I'm sure it's not cheap to make them. I'm going to come down here before I go into it.
Cartoons as basically a long kind of advertisement to sell their toys.
Yep. So the concept's been
And
around,
another
concept's been
thing
around
as
a long
well
time.
is back in those kind of days, and even up to the like from the 50s through to about the late 90s, toys and cartoons were very polarised towards male and female, whereas now there seems to be a lot more
cross-gender
inclusivity. You know, there's not quite so much stark difference between boys for girls and boys for toys.
Yeah,
Toys for
you're
boys.
absolutely right there, and I think that's developed along the line of the way that modern society has developed.
Yeah.
I can't remember which major toy chain it is. Maybe somebody can tell me, but they're no longer going to have a boys section and a girls section.
Is it Mattel?
Target, I think.
Is that Target?
I think
Yeah,
it's Target.
I think I read it somewhere that one of the major toy sections is no longer going to present their toys delineated by gender, which I think is a great move. Let me just check the time. I actually have 10 more minutes, but I'm not sure you guys want to sit here for 10 minutes, and the next presenter will come here in a minute, so I'll take a couple more questions and then we'll finish up. Do you know what I think it's a shame that Hasbro have never done anything with the ponies is in terms of the toys and the playsets, they've never done anything really adventurous, like ponies going to space, you know? I like to see like, ponies in astronaut suits going in a space rocket, or you know, I don't know, Indiana Jones ponies, or things like that. You know, the playset concepts, they're all kind of quite safe, you know? We play in a castle, we have tea, we dress them up, you know, it's all quite pedestrian. Whereas I think it would be cool if the playsets had some more adventurous, you know, the toy line would have some more adventurous concepts in play. And maybe that would attract more boys, you know, younger children to play with the ponies. You know, if ponies were in astronaut suits flying in space rockets, well that's not girly, is it? You know, like going to the Sauron.
How does the Country Girls line fit in this collection? I know it's been around for long.
It was not at all to compete with Monster High, no sir. It's my assessment.
Yeah, right.
But how about Bratz?
Well, that arguably they came first. You know, so you had the kind of Barbie doll concept, you know, the impossibly dimensioned female, which has existed since, you know, sort of the 50s, 60s. And then the kind of the brats come in, and they're supposed to be more teenage and more hip, more cool. But again, they still have these impossible proportions, you know. But it was more about, you know, fashion and things like that. And then, of course, that's evolved into things like Monster High and Ever After High, and Disney, the one they do with the Disneys and the fairy tale characters and things like that. And I think, you know, a Hasbro executive thought we're missing out here, guys. All the other major toy companies have got their doll thing. What do we need to do? What do we need to do? I know, we'll take ponies and dolls and we'll mesh them. We'll mesh them together.
There were brass ponies. You know about those?
Oh yes. So yeah, there were the Bratz ponies. Anybody seen Bratz ponies? They were kind of G3.5 size, and they were very, very chunky in the way that 3.5s are, and they had these really big, kind of pointy, snouty shaped heads. Anyone seen a Takara, My Little Pony? They're kind of not too dissimilar to that, with the kind of big round noses. I don't think they're terribly attractive. I'm sure somebody has customised some. They also brought out a range of Bratz seats.
Oh, yeah.
And in fact, us Oldie G1 collectors have been bleating for years that Hasbro should have done, you know, a sea pony type range. You know, we've been telling them it since G3. You know, it came out and they don't listen. They finally listen to us about boys because, of course, we have G4 showing on. But I think they need to do some more
Who aren't shining armour?
Yeah, they got shining armour, but I want to brush it. Right, I'll take one more question, then I really have to finish, because there's probably something else starting here in a few minutes. Yes?
Another storyline question, right? If you could choose between, like, storylines like Doctor Who and Fallout, which one would you choose?
Okay, I don't know who Fallout is, so I might have to go with Doctor Who's. I'm more about the toys than I am about the cartoons, so I can't claim to be any kind of thing. So, yeah, I'd have to go with Doctor Who's. I mean, I quite like Doctor Who anyway. I'm not a Fallout fan, but the concept of travelling 3 times, Pride and Prejudice, about going into the future with the rockets. I think there's a time travel opportunity there.
Timey wimey.
Were some people upset there that there were hands up and I didn't go for them? I'll take one question from over there and then finish if there were some hands. Were there some hands over there?
I had a suggestion.
Yes.
There could be a main 7 on G5.
Yes, they could introduce an extra character. I mean, why not? I'm sure.
That's Starlight. So main 7.
Represent the.
Right. Thank you, everybody.